The words hit me like a physical blow, though they shouldn't have surprised me. I was 28 years old, standing in my childhood kitchen during what was supposed to be a celebration of my sister Emma's engagement, when my mother looked directly at me and said, "Well, at least Emma turned out right. Maya has always been the black sheep of this family." The room fell silent. Emma's fiancé David shifted uncomfortably. My father cleared his throat, and my younger brother Jake suddenly found his phone fascinating. But my mother, Patricia Winters, just stood there with that familiar look of disappointment etched into her perfectly made-up face, as if she'd simply commented on the weather. I felt the familiar knot form in my stomach, the same one I'd carried since childhood whenever I failed to meet her impossible standards. But this time, something was different. This time, I didn't look away. "Excuse me?" I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, don't be dramatic, Maya. You know what I mean. Emma's getting married to a lawyer. She has her master's degree. She bought that beautiful house. Jake's in medical school. And you—" She gestured vaguely at me, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "You're still waiting tables and living in that tiny apartment, chasing some ridiculous dream of being a writer?" The injustice of it burned through me like acid. For 28 years, I had endured her constant comparisons, her backhanded comments, her way of making me feel like I was never enough. But calling me the black sheep in front of everyone on what should have been a happy family occasion felt like the final insult. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had just signed a book deal 3 days earlier. A 6-figure advance for my debut novel. I had been planning to surprise them all at dinner to finally prove that my ridiculous dream was worth something. But now, staring at my mother's smug expression, I realized something that changed everything. She didn't want me to succeed. She never had. "Mom, that's enough," Emma said quietly, but I barely heard her. I was remembering other moments, other conversations, seeing them all through new eyes, like when I'd been accepted to Columbia's MFA program 6 years ago, and she'd sighed and said, "I suppose if you insist on wasting your father's money on more school, at least pick something practical." She'd convinced me not to go, to be responsible and get a job instead. Or when I'd had my first short story published in a literary magazine 2 years ago, and she'd glanced at it and said, "That's nice, dear. Jake, show your mother your latest test scores." Or the dozens of times she'd introduced me to her friends as Maya, my youngest daughter, while introducing Emma as my daughter, the marketing director, and Jake as my son, the future doctor. I had always told myself she meant well, that she was just trying to motivate me. But standing there, watching her expect me to shrink away in shame like I always did, I finally understood the truth. My mother wasn't disappointed in me. She was threatened by me. Emma was safe, successful but conventional, someone who reflected well on Patricia Winters without overshadowing her. Jake was the golden boy, the son who could do no wrong. But me? I was unpredictable, creative, independent. I asked questions she couldn't answer and dreamed dreams she'd never dared to have. And she had spent my entire life trying to clip my wings. "You know what, Mom?" I said, straightening my shoulders. "You're absolutely right. I am the black sheep, and I'm proud of it." I left that night without another word, driving home in a fury that only grew stronger over the next few days. I kept thinking about all the opportunities I'd missed because of her discouragement, all the times I doubted myself because she'd planted those seeds of doubt. That's when I decided to do something about it. The plan came to me gradually, each piece falling into place with beautiful symmetry. If my mother wanted to see me as the family failure, I would show her exactly what that looked like, but not in the way she expected. First, I called my editor at Riverside Publishing and told her I wanted to make a change to my author bio. Instead of the standard professional summary, I gave her something else entirely. Then I reached out to my college roommate Sarah, who now worked at the local newspaper. Remember how you always said you wanted to write a feature about local authors? I might have a story for you. Next, I contacted my cousin Rachel in Los Angeles, the one who worked in television production and had been trying to get me on a morning talk show for months. I'm ready to do that interview now, I told her. But the most important call was to my grandmother, Nana Rose, my father's mother. She was 92 and sharp as a tack, and she had never liked my mother's treatment of me. I need to ask you something about Mom, I said when I visited her the following Sunday. How long has she been trying to keep me down? Nana Rose's eyes flashed with something between anger and sadness. Oh, sweetheart, since you were about 12 years old. Maybe younger. She told me things I'd never known. How my mother had hidden my acceptance letter to the summer writing program when I was 14. How she'd forgotten to mention that my high school English teacher had called to recommend me for a scholarship. How she'd thrown away letters from literary magazines when I was in college. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. I tried, honey, but you wouldn't have believed me then. You needed to figure it out for yourself. She patted my hand with her papery fingers. What are you planning to do about it? I smiled. Something she'll never see coming. The first domino fell 2 weeks later when the newspaper feature came out. Sarah had done a beautiful job with the piece, titled From Waitress to Best-Selling Author, Local, Woman's Journey to Literary Success. It detailed my upcoming novel, the six-figure advance, and the 3-book deal I'd negotiated. But the most important part was the quote she'd gotten from me about overcoming family expectations. Sometimes the people who should support your dreams are the ones who try hardest to kill them, I was quoted as saying. My mother always called me the black sheep of the family because I chose a different path. Now I realize that being the black sheep just means you're brave enough to be yourself. My phone started ringing within hours of the paper hitting the stands. Friends, acquaintances, even former classmates called to congratulate me. But the most satisfying call came from Mrs. Henderson, my mother's best friend and biggest rival in their social circle. Maya, darling, I had no idea you were such an accomplished writer. Your mother must be so proud. I could practically hear my mother's blood pressure rising from across town. The second domino fell when the morning talk show interview aired nationally. Rachel had gotten me on Good Morning America Weekend, where I discussed my book and the challenges facing young writers. When the host asked about my family's support, I gave the answer I'd been practicing. Family dynamics can be complicated when you're pursuing an unconventional career. There were times when I felt like the odd one out, like I didn't fit the mold of what was expected, but I've learned that sometimes being different is exactly what you need to be. The interview went viral on social media. Black Sheep Proud started trending, with thousands of people sharing their own stories of overcoming family doubt and following their dreams. My book pre-orders skyrocketed. My mother's friends started treating her differently at their weekly bridge games and charity luncheons. Instead of listening to her subtle brags about Emma's house or Jake's grades, they wanted to talk about her famous daughter, the author, the daughter she'd never mentioned in their previous conversations. But I wasn't done yet. The third domino was the book itself. My novel, The Golden Child's Shadow, was a thinly veiled exploration of family dynamics and emotional manipulation. While the character names and some details were changed, anyone who knew our family would recognize the story. It told the tale of a young woman whose mother systematically undermines her confidence and sabotages her opportunities, all while praising her more conventional siblings. The mother in the book was complex, not a villain exactly, but someone whose own insecurities and fears drove her to control and diminish others. When advance copies started circulating 3 months before publication, the whispers began in earnest. My mother's carefully constructed image as the supportive matriarch began to crumble as people read between the lines and remembered conversations, moments, telling looks they'd witnessed over the years. The final domino fell on Thanksgiving. I had been invited to the family dinner, of course. My mother couldn't uninvite me without causing even more gossip. But the atmosphere was tense from the moment I walked in. "Maya," my mother said stiffly when she answered the door, "how nice of you to join us." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied with a bright smile. "I have so much to be thankful for this year." Dinner was excruciating. My mother barely spoke to me, while Emma and Jake seemed caught between excitement about my success and loyalty to our mother. My father, as always, stayed neutral and uncomfortable. It was during dessert that my mother finally snapped. "I don't appreciate being made a laughingstock in this community," she hissed when Jake and Emma stepped outside to take a call from their grandmother. "That book of yours?" "What about it?" I asked calmly. "You know exactly what about it. Making me look like some kind of monster. After everything I've done for you, all the sacrifices." "What sacrifices?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended. "Name one thing you sacrificed for my dreams, Mom. One." She opened and closed her mouth, clearly struggling. We paid for your college. Where you talked me out of pursuing my major. Where you convinced me that creative writing was impractical. I was trying to protect you from disappointment. No." I stood up, my hands shaking but my voice steady. "You were protecting yourself from having a daughter who might outshine you, who might prove that there are other ways to be successful, other ways to be valuable. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth? Succeed despite your best efforts to stop me?" I looked her directly in the eyes, the same way I had that night in the kitchen, but this time I wasn't backing down. "You want to know what I'm most thankful for this year, Mom? I'm thankful that I finally realized you were wrong about me. I'm thankful that I stopped believing the lies you told me about my worth, my potential, my dreams." She was crying now, tears smearing her perfect makeup. "I was just trying to be realistic." "You were being cruel. There's a difference." I picked up my purse, my dinner untouched. "I spent my whole life trying to earn your approval, trying to be the daughter you wanted, but I was never going to be enough, was I? Because you didn't want me to be enough. You needed me to be less than you." "Maya, please." But I was already walking toward the door. "I'm done being your scapegoat, Mom. I'm done being the family disappointment. You can call me the black sheep all you want, but we both know the truth now. I'm not the failure in this family. I'm the one who escaped." I left her standing in the dining room, surrounded by the ruins of her perfect Thanksgiving dinner and her perfectly constructed lies. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Within days, 3 of my mother's closest friends had called to check on her after reading my book, which had leaked early online. The book club she'd led for 15 years quietly asked her to step down. The charity board where she'd served as treasurer suddenly found reasons to question her leadership. Emma called me crying 2 weeks later. "She's been in bed for 3 days," she said. "She won't eat, won't shower. Dad's talking about getting her professional help." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old guilt. But then I remembered the acceptance letter she'd hidden, the dreams she'd crushed, the 28 years of systematic undermining disguised as motherly concern. "Maybe that's what she needs," I said gently. "Maybe this is her chance to figure out why she felt the need to hurt me all these years." "But Maya..." "Emma, let me ask you something. In all your memories of growing up, can you remember a single time Mom genuinely celebrated one of my achievements? Without immediately comparing it to yours or Jake's, Or finding something wrong with it? The silence stretched long enough that I knew she was really thinking about it. "Oh my God," she whispered finally. "I never realized. Maya, I'm so sorry." My book became a bestseller, spending 16 weeks on the New York Times list. It won the Goodreads Choice Award for debut fiction and was optioned for a Netflix series. I quit my waitressing job, moved to a beautiful apartment in the Arts District, and started work on my second novel. More importantly, I started receiving letters from readers, especially young women, who saw their own families reflected in my story. Women who had been told they were too much, too different, too ambitious. Women who had been made to feel like black sheep for refusing to fit into boxes that were too small for their dreams. I framed the first letter I received and hung it in my office. It simply said, "Thank you for showing me that being the black sheep isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of." My mother and I didn't speak for 6 months. When we finally did, it was at Jake's medical school graduation. She approached me hesitantly, looking smaller somehow, older. "Maya," she said quietly, could we talk?" We sat in her car in the parking lot while the celebration continued inside. She cried, really cried, not the performative tears I was used to seeing. "I read your book," she said finally, and I recognized myself. I didn't like what I saw. She twisted her wedding ring around her finger. "I've been seeing a therapist. She's helping me understand some things about myself, about my own mother." I listened as she told me about her childhood, about a grandmother who had criticized every choice she made, who had made her feel like she was never enough, about how she'd sworn she would never be like that, and then had somehow become exactly that. "I thought I was protecting you," she said, "from failure, from disappointment. I thought if I prepared you for the worst, you'd be stronger." "You weren't protecting me from disappointment, Mom. You were creating it." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know that now. I know I hurt you. I know I was wrong." She looked at me with eyes that seemed clearer than I'd ever seen them. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't even know if you can forgive me. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I'm proud of the woman you became despite what I did to you." It wasn't a fairy tale reconciliation. Trust, once broken so thoroughly, doesn't heal overnight. But it was a beginning. 2 years later, we have coffee once a month. She's different now, quieter, more thoughtful. She asks about my writing with genuine interest and sends me articles she thinks might inspire my work. She's seeing the therapist regularly and has started volunteering at a literacy center, helping adults learn to read. She still struggles sometimes. Old patterns die hard. But now, when she catches herself being critical or dismissive, she stops and apologizes. And when she introduces me to her friends, she says, "This is my daughter Maya, the best-selling author." My second book, The Art of Becoming, was dedicated to all the black sheep who refused to be silent. It debuted at #1 on the bestseller list. At the book launch party, surrounded by friends, fellow writers, and publishing industry professionals, I saw my family arrive together. Emma and Jake, beaming with pride. My father looking genuinely happy for the first time in years. And my mother standing a little apart, but smiling, really smiling, as she watched me sign books and hug readers. When the crowd finally thinned, she approached my signing table. "I bought a copy for each of my book club friends," she said, setting a stack of books in front of me. "I told them they had to read it to understand what real strength looks like." I looked up at her, pen poised above the title page. "What would you like me to write?" She thought for a moment, then smiled. "Right. To the woman who taught me that sometimes you have to lose yourself to find out who you really are. Thank you for finally letting me be the black sheep. Love, Maya." As I signed the book, I realized that my revenge had become something else entirely. It had started as a desire to hurt her the way she'd hurt me, to expose her cruelty and make her pay for years of emotional manipulation. But somewhere along the way, it had transformed into something more powerful, the courage to claim my own story. I had spent so many years letting her define me, first as the disappointment, then as the black sheep. But in the end, I learned that labels only have the power you give them. And sometimes the very thing someone uses to shame you can become the source of your greatest strength. Looking around at the life I'd built, the career, the independence, the relationships based on mutual respect rather than conditional approval, I realized that being the black sheep had been the greatest gift my mother could have given me. It had forced me to find my own way, to trust my own judgment, to build my own worth from the inside out. It had taught me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you, who celebrates your victories, who believes in your dreams. And most importantly, it had shown me that sometimes the person who tries to make you feel small is actually showing you exactly how big you're meant to be. As I walked out of the bookstore that night, surrounded by people who valued my voice and celebrated my success, I whispered a quiet thank you to that scared, doubting girl who had stood in her childhood kitchen all those years ago. Thank you for refusing to shrink. Thank you for choosing to grow. Thank you for proving that being different isn't a flaw. It's a superpower. And thank you for showing me that the best revenge isn't making someone else smaller. It's making yourself impossible to ignore.